I've taken a peek at the schedule, and I know not only are we 6 minutes ahead, I was supposed to start at 9:22, but we're even further ahead in joke telling because we have Chris here, which relieves you if you would talk to my wife of my complete inability to say anything funny. I am, however, not a fast-talking economist. Maybe I was in my youth. So this will be slow, and we hope we'll keep with the timing. I'm on the left arrow. My job is to help SACOG understand the prospects for the economy, because the prospects for the economy will determine the size of the growth that we're planning for here, the number of people, the number of households, the kinds of jobs. But the forecasting process is not just one way. That's why there's the second arrow. As Marty said, regions compete with regions. And so when we do our forecasting, we have to assess how well SACOG and other areas around the country will prepare communities that are attractive places to live and work. The two arrows work together. I'll have more to say about that later. 8 years ago, many of us were in that initial room in 2002 at a time when the future for this region was surging ahead. Job growth was plentiful. Very high levels of population growth and housing growth were starting. It was a time of fairly optimistic future for the SACOG region. The graph represents SACOG's ability to outpace the state and the nation in job growth. We were growing faster than competing areas in almost every year. That was beginning of a number of years where we were building 20 to 25,000 housing units in this region. The beginning of the housing price rise, but there was this amazing period in the late 90s and the early part of the decade where median prices here were the same as in the nation. So you had this attractive, fast-growing region that could offer really affordable housing. Since then, there have been two periods. There was a period where it looked like the blueprint numbers were low. There was a period of 40 to 50,000 residents coming here every year. We were building 25,000 housing units a year, far above what the blueprint had envisioned. And then there were two parts to the second period, and it's important to think about them both. Before the recession, the pain that we're all feeling now, today being the first day of positive private sector job growth in really over 2 years. The recession has had an impact on the growth. But before the recession, the growth here was slowing, primarily because housing prices had become, and this is a very important economist technical term, insane as well as unsustainable. So the slowing of growth, we had a surge that pushed us ahead of the blueprint, a slowing that pushes us back about at the blueprint phase, and we are in now a time that is scary for everybody. We saw our share of jobs, which had surged upward, begin to plateau, in part because state government, our largest economic base sector, had stopped growing, was growing very slowly, and the whole sense of excitement in Sacramento that this was a happening place, we've gotten caught up in the gridlock and paralysis that seems to have overtaken California. But in any way, the share had plateaued. The median housing prices, which were $200,000 8 years ago, went up to $400,000 and now have come back down, and that is a piece of good news, but there sure was a roller coaster. And that population growth that was surging above 50,000 had begun to slow even before the recession. Regions compete with regions, and when our competitive position slipped, in part because our housing prices became twice the national average, in part because our largest sector hit a period of slow growth, that green line, the domestic migration, the people moving to the SACOG region dropped. And you notice that it dropped well before the last...
To my friends.
What? There won't be a recession in 2020 and 2035. I know that's very hard to believe. I do this for a living. It's unbelievably hard to talk about the distant future when the near term sounds so bleak, but that's why we do projects like the MTP and the blueprint to plan for that future, to get us out of the immediate mindset and think about what the world is going to be like 10 years from now and 25 years from now. We have this question of whether our big sector, state government, is going to be able to rebound. Will there be a new growth sector, something related to energy or healthcare? On the other hand, we now have housing affordability back somewhat, but will we be able to maintain that? And will builders be able to produce homes and apartments that people will find attractive at these current prices? Can we maintain this housing affordability into the future? Part of that, again, is that second arrow coming back where planning influences the prospects for the economy. Okay. The numbers we're producing this cycle still have the SACOG region growing faster than the state and the nation, much as we did 8 years ago. But all of those growth rates are going to be a little bit slower than they looked 5 years ago. Partly, a lot of people are retiring, as we knew they would. Partly, the U.S. population is going to be a little bit slower in terms of growth than it looked previously. Foreign immigration is down. This will be a fast-growing region, but it's unlikely that we'll return to those 50,000 population growth levels that we had in the early part of this decade. We're more back in line with what the blueprint was saying 8 years ago, adopted 5 years ago. The major question I'll talk about at the end, and we'll continue to be talking about through the blueprint process, is whether we can provide housing that these new residents want at a price that they can afford. State government looks completely paralyzed now. I am coming back up on Tuesday to talk to the state Assembly Committee on the budget, and I don't have a clue as to how to break the paralysis. But this government that is centered here in the region will need to serve at least 10 to 12 million more residents by 2035. And somehow we will resolve this, and this huge part of our economic base and all of the companies associated with that help plan for the infrastructure and the projects, there will be growth at some point in the future. We are assuming, with UC Davis, with the Bay Area close by, with the incredible innovation agenda that the nation is now embarking on, that the SACOG region will participate, as it did in the last tech boom, in one or more of these industries. I can't tell you which one it will be now, whether something in energy efficiency or solar or developing batteries for electric vehicles or in medical records technology, but we're fairly certain that the SACOG region, as it has in the past, will participate in some way in the technology boom. Again, back to that second arrow. We are assuming, and it is your job to make it true, that in the regions compete to regions narrative, that this region will compete with well-planned communities and amenities, places that people will want to come and work and live. Bad news for existing homeowners becomes good news for a competitive future. The median home price here, if it lasts, is now back near the national average. So as in 2002, when the blueprint started, SACOG offers a great region at an affordable price if we can build at these prices. These are just numbers. The pattern is the SACOG in blue will have job growth slightly faster than the state and the nation, but all of the future job growth will be less than we experienced over the past 2 decades. In large part, I said, because many people in the room and elsewhere will be retiring. If you look at the population growth and therefore the market for housing over the broad period, there's a lot of growth for older retirement couples. There's some growth for young adults, and there is some growth that may support additional greenfield development out in the future. Growth tending towards older households, but a broad mix. But, okay, the growth in the family-oriented households, the growth in the 35 to 54-year-old age group comes at the end. In the next 10 years, maybe in the next 15 years, our population growth is going to be very heavily concentrated in groups that seem to say they're going to give the market a signal that supports the blueprint. So look at what we're looking at for the immediate period. A huge number of older households. Will they do as my wife and I did, which was sell our family home when the children moved out, but we wanted to stay in Palo Alto where we lived, so we found a place downtown. The car rarely leaves the garage at night. It doesn't leave in the day because I walk to work. Everything we need is nearby. We are in a walkable community. How many people in the SACOG region, older households, will choose that, will want that? Can we build walkable neighborhood housing, not just in downtown Sacramento, but in downtown Roseville and downtowns all over the region? I live in a suburban downtown walkable community. And so the kind of compact development that Mike talked about, that the blueprint talks about, will be driven in part by serving households that are right there wanting to stay in the region they grew up in and work in. Many will still work, as I do, but no longer need a big family house. Can we provide housing that's attractive to them? You see the second spurt, young adults like my son. Well, all regions in California, given the kind of growth that we're talking about, are competing for young professionals. They're not yet at a stage where they have a family, they have many children. They're going to want nice condominiums or townhouses or apartments. They're going to want to live in happening communities. And so for the next 10 years, before we begin to see a little surge again in family households, this is who we're trying to serve. And I think if you're on a city council or county board, that you're going to begin to hear from developers and residents that they're going to want the kind of compact housing that fits in with the blueprint. I think the job is going to get easier for a while. Let me end on perhaps the hardest note. Because because we are in gridlock about the budget, because we are in a horrible recession that has cut revenues, cut optimism, we face the challenge not only in the region, but throughout California of being able to do not just the regional planning. I actually have great faith in SACOG to be able to implement your part of regions compete with regions. I'm less certain about the state's role. And so we all hoping for a better SACOG, a better Southern California, a better Bay Area, a better Central Valley, become advocates and hopefully active participants in finding a way to back off from the gridlock so that the state of California can play its role in providing communities that are great places to live and work. Yeah, okay, we can go with that. Because if you travel abroad, if you travel throughout the nation to other states less in gridlock, they are, as best they can, building and investing for the future. They know, and we should know, that we can't compete for these innovative jobs, this innovation agenda that's beginning to take over the nation, unless we have world-class infrastructure, unless families that come here can say, you know, our child can get into the CSU system or the UC system back in 2010 where they were cutting enrollment and cutting classes. That was just a very temporary thing, and mercifully that's over now, and they've planned for the higher enrollment and the need to allow every student to graduate from high school and go to community college or university if they want. We hope that in the next 10 years, as families and businesses look at the SACOG region and the state of California, they'll be able to say, we stepped up and we have world-class infrastructure. We resolved our debate over water. We have enough energy. We were willing to take a penny or two out of our pocket and invest for transportation. I don't know any region in the work that I do, maybe John, when he talks, can talk more. I don't know any region that has succeeded successfully without another technical economist term, without a kick-ass public investment agenda. The competition is simply too great. And so I'm pretty confident. I'm also a consultant. Full disclosure, I'm a consultant for these guys. But I am pretty confident that SACOG and the communities here can pull off your role. But we really need to step up and make competing for the future. Regions compete with regions, but states compete with states. And we need to get this state moving again so all of our regions can plan for the future. Thank you.